He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for his phone. He simply looked at the woman standing over him, nodded once, and picked up his coat. That was the part no one in the dining room could explain afterward. The reservation at Alderton House had been made 6 weeks in advance. Table 12, corner window, Friday evening. The kind of table that required a name attached to something. A membership, a referral, a corporate account that the front desk recognized without needing to look twice. The kind of table that was not offered to walk-ins and not confirmed to anyone the maitre d' could not place. The name on the reservation was Carter. Victor Carter arrived at 7:14, which was 4 minutes before his booking. He was wearing a gray merino sweater, dark trousers, and boots that had been resoled twice. He carried a single jacket over his arm, wool, unlined, bought in Halifax several years ago from a shop that no longer existed. He was 51 years old, and he looked like a man who spent most of his time somewhere without a dress code. A research station, perhaps, or a small office with bad lighting and a whiteboard that had never been fully erased. He gave his name to the host at the stand. The host, a young man named Brett Colville, looked at the reservation screen, then looked at Victor, then looked at the screen again. "Mr. Carter," Brett said. "That's right. And you're dining alone this evening? My daughter will be joining me at past. Brett nodded slowly. He picked up 2 menus, hesitated, then picked up one more as though reconsidering. He led Victor through the main room, past the bar, past the fireplace with the iron grate, past the 2 tops near the window that were already filled with couples whose clothes had been chosen with intention, and stopped at a smaller table against the back wall, a 4-top, not table 12. Victor looked at it. He looked at the room. He had been to Alderton House before, though not recently, and he knew the layout well enough to know that the corner table, his corner table, was currently unoccupied. He could see it from where he stood. White tablecloth, small candle, the window behind it showing the last of the evening light over the canal. "My reservation is for table 12, Victor said. Brett set the menus down on the back wall table. "We've had a slight adjustment to the floor plan this evening. This table offers the same menu, same service. Table 12 is empty. It's being held for another party." Victor said nothing for a moment. He looked at the empty table again. He looked at Brett. He had spent 30 years reading rooms, reading the particular quality of silence that precedes a decision someone has already made and is only now announcing, and he recognized this one. "What time is that party arriving?" he asked. "I'm not certain of the exact time. Is their reservation before or after mine?" Brett straightened slightly. "I can assure you this table has full access to our evening menu. I'd like to speak with the manager," Victor said. His voice had not changed. It was the same register, the same pace. He was not leaning forward. He was not making a scene. He simply made the request the way a man makes a request when he already knows the answer, and is giving the other person one opportunity to correct course before the situation becomes something else entirely. Brett excused himself. The restaurant manager that evening was a woman named Sandra Forcade. She had worked at Alderton House for 11 years, the last 4 as general manager, and she ran the floor with the kind of efficiency that left very little room for improvisation. She knew the reservation list the way a conductor knows a score. Every name, every table, every note about dietary restrictions or anniversary celebrations, or in certain cases the specific instruction that had been added to a booking 6 days ago by the restaurant's director of operations. The instruction on Victor Carter's reservation read, "Reassign if feasible. Table 12 preferred for the Elborn group." Sandra had flagged it herself. She had not asked why. She walked to the back of the room to find a man in a gray sweater standing beside a table he had not sat down at, holding his jacket over his arm, watching her approach with an expression that was entirely unreadable. "Mr. Carter," she said, "I understand there's been some confusion." "There hasn't been any confusion," Victor said. "I have a reservation for table 12. Table 12 is unoccupied. I'd like to understand why I've been seated elsewhere." Sandra had a script for moments like this. She had used it many times, and it almost always worked because most people, when approached by someone with confidence and a title and a practiced tone of apology, would accept the substitute and fold the discomfort away somewhere private. Most people did not want the confrontation. Most people decided that the back table was fine, actually, and ordered the salmon and said nothing more about it. She looked at Victor Carter and made a very quick assessment. Gray sweater, unremarkable boots, no watch she could see, no one waiting at the bar for him, no assistant hovering nearby, no indication of the kind of profile that required special handling. "Mr. Carter, table 12 is reserved for one of our premium members this evening, and I'm afraid we aren't able to accommodate the change. I can offer you a premium member, Victor repeated. Yes. I've held a membership at this restaurant for 8 years, he said. My late wife and I used to come here for our anniversary. I've hosted business dinners here, brought clients here, referred colleagues here. I've never asked for anything except what I've booked. Sandra did not move. I'm not asking you to change anything, Victor continued. I'm asking you to honor the reservation I made 6 weeks ago for the table I've sat at before, which is currently empty. He paused. That's a reasonable request. Sandra looked at him. She thought about the Elborn group. 4 people, 2 of them regular guests with corporate accounts. One of them a man named Jeffrey Elborn who had sent a bottle of wine to the kitchen last month, with a note that the kitchen had framed as a joke but also kept. She thought about the Friday margin and the upsell potential and the calculation she had made when she had seen the flag on the reservation and decided it was manageable. She had made a judgment. She had looked at the name, Carter, and the absence of a corporate account marker, and the single guest notation, and she had decided this was the kind of reservation that could be moved without cost. I'm sorry, she said. The table isn't available. Victor looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up the jacket he had set across the back of the chair, folded it over his arm, and said very quietly, All right. He walked back through the dining room, past the bar, past the fireplace, past the couples with their intentional clothes, and out the front door. He did not raise his voice. He did not demand a refund or a complaint form. He did not take a photograph of the empty table 12 or ask for the owner's name. Brett Colville watched him go and felt, without being entirely able to articulate it, that something had just happened that would matter later. Victor's daughter arrived at 7:32. Her name was Audrey Carter, and she was 26, and she had her father's eyes and her mother's way of entering a room, quietly, but in a way that made you notice the quiet. She came through the front door, looked around, did not see her father, and asked the host at the stand. Brett told her that Mr. Carter had left. Audrey looked at him. Left? There was Brett started a seating issue. Audrey pulled out her phone. There was a message from her father, sent 7 minutes ago. Change of plans. I'm at the place on Millbank. Join me when you can. She stood in the entrance of Alderton House for a moment. She read the message again. Then she looked at Brett Colville with an expression that was not anger exactly. It was something more like recognition, the look of someone who has seen a particular thing happen before and had hoped not to see it again. Which table was his reservation? She asked. Table 12. She looked toward the dining room. Table 12 was still empty. The candle was lit. No one was seated there. She left without saying anything else. The Elborn group arrived at 8:15. They were seated at table 12. They ordered the tasting menu and 2 bottles from the upper tier of the wine list. And Jeffrey Elborn told a story about a golf tournament in Banff that made everyone at the table laugh twice. Sandra Forcade checked on them once, briefly, and felt the evening resolve into the shape she had intended. She did not think about Victor Carter again until Monday morning. The call came at 9:47 from a woman named Patricia Loring, who was the executive assistant to the chairman of the Alderton Group, not the restaurant, but the hospitality company that owned the restaurant, and 4 others like it, and a boutique hotel in Quebec City, and a conference center in downtown Toronto that booked out months in advance. Patricia Loring's voice was professionally pleasant, which was a specific quality Sandra had learned to identify over the years. The pleasantness of someone who was delivering information that had already been decided and was doing so as a courtesy, not a consultation. The chairman would like to meet with you this week, Patricia said. Wednesday, if you're available. He'll come to the restaurant. Of course, Sandra said. Can I ask what this is regarding? There was a brief pause. He'd prefer to discuss it in person. Sandra set the phone down and stood at her desk for a moment. She went through her mental list of things that might prompt a visit from the chairman. A food safety issue, a staffing complaint, a review in a national outlet that she hadn't seen yet. She considered all of them in order. She did not at first consider Victor Carter. Then she pulled up the reservation log from Friday evening. She looked at the name on table 12. She looked at the instruction that had been flagged against the Carter booking 6 days before the reservation. She read it again. Reassign if feasible. Table 12 preferred for the Elborn group. She had not questioned it at the time. She had not looked up who had added it, or asked why table 12 specifically, or wondered who Victor Carter was beyond the notation in the system. She had made the judgment she always made: margin, profile, priority, and acted on it. She sat down. Victor Carter had built Alderton Group from 2 properties in 2001. The second one had nearly bankrupted him. He had remortgaged his house, his wife had gone back to work, and for about 18 months they had operated on the kind of timeline where a single bad quarter would have ended it. It did not end it. He had been careful and methodical and, when necessary, willing to wait longer than the people across the table from him were comfortable waiting. By 2009, he held 6 properties. By 2015, 14. He had taken the company public briefly, then private again, on his own terms, at a moment that people in the industry still cited in business school cases. He was not particularly well known outside of the sector. He did not seek profiles, did not attend the conferences where chairmen gave keynote speeches about vision and resilience, did not appear on the lists that circulated in certain magazines every autumn. His name was on the company's incorporation documents, and on the lease agreements, and on the letter that went out to all staff when the company made a significant hire or change. That was sufficient. He had been to Alderton House on a Friday evening in a gray merino sweater because it was the anniversary of the night he had taken his wife there for the first time, which was also, by coincidence, the night she had told him she was pregnant with Audrey. He had not told anyone this. He had not made a note of it in the reservation. He had simply booked the table he always booked and planned to spend an hour in the corner, with his daughter eating a meal that cost more than it needed to, in a room his wife had loved. He had not been looking for a reason to do anything. He had not arrived at Alderton House with a test in mind or a point to make. He had been hungry, and it was Friday, and he missed her in the uncomplicated way he still missed her sometimes on days that had no particular significance except that she was not in them. The decision Sandra Forcade made on Friday evening was not, in itself, the thing that set the rest of it in motion. People made bad calls. He understood that. He had made bad calls of his own. Judgment errors, missed reads, moments where he had looked at a situation and seen the wrong thing and acted on it. What set the rest of it in motion was simpler than that. He had gone back to his office on Saturday morning, looked at the reservation flag that had been added to his booking, the flag he had found through his assistant, who had access to the operations system, who had pulled it at his quiet request, and seen the name of the staff member who had added it. It was not Sandra Forcade. The flag had been added by a man named Dominic Harwell, who was the director of client relations for the restaurant division, and who had received a request from Jeffrey Elburn's office 6 days before the reservation. Victor had hired Dominic Harwell 3 years ago from a competing firm on the strength of a reference and a 20-minute conversation in which Harwell had said several intelligent things about guest retention and brand experience. He had given Harwell discretion over a range of operational decisions. That was intentional. Victor did not believe in managing people from too close a distance. You hired people for judgment and then you let them use it. That was the arrangement. What Dominic Harwell had done was use his access to the operations system to reassign a standing member's reservation, without disclosure, without notation beyond the flag, and without any apparent awareness that the name he was moving was the same name on the company's founding documents. In order to accommodate a guest who had sent a nice bottle of wine to the kitchen once, and whose corporate account, while real, was not exceptional, Victor was not angry about the table. He was not particularly invested in Table 12 as a table. He was interested in what the decision revealed, that somewhere in the organization he had built, a set of values had drifted in a direction he had not intended, and no one had noticed, or if they had noticed, had not said anything. That was the thing he sat with over the weekend. Not the indignity of being moved to the back of his own restaurant, which was, he acknowledged, somewhat absurd, but the question of how a thing like that becomes normal, how a judgment gets made repeatedly, without examination, how the guest in the gray sweater becomes the one you move, and the guest with the corporate account becomes the one you protect, and no one in the building stops to ask whether that's the right order of priority, or whether it reflects the restaurant's stated values, or whether, in fact, it's the kind of decision that, made enough times, changes what a place actually is. He arrived at Alderton House on Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. He was wearing the same gray sweater. Audrey had told him, over the phone on Saturday night, that he did not have to do it that way. He could send someone. He could handle it through channels. He could write a memo that would travel down the org chart and land somewhere useful without him having to sit in a room and look anyone in the eye. "I know," he had said. "Are you going to do it anyway?" "Yes." She had been quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said. "Will you tell me how it goes, if it goes well, And if it doesn't, then I'll tell you that too. Sandra Forcade was waiting in the private dining room off the main hall. She had arrived 40 minutes early, which was not typical for her. She had spent the intervening time reviewing the reservation log, the flag, the guest history, and a printed copy of the Alderton Group's service standards document that she had last read in its entirety 2 years ago. When Victor walked in, she stood. He sat down at the table. He did not open a folder or take out a device. He looked at her. "Tell me what happened Friday," he said. Sandra told him. She did not omit anything, and she did not minimize her role, and she did not name Dominic Harwell until Victor asked her directly whether she had placed the flag herself. "No," she said. "I received the adjusted floor plan and I implemented it. Did you ask why the adjustment had been made?" A pause. "No, did you look at who made it?" Another pause. "No." Victor nodded. He was quiet for a moment. The dining room was empty at this hour, chairs still on tables, light coming in gray, and even through the high windows, the smell of last night's kitchen faint beneath the cleaning solution. "I've been coming to this restaurant for 8 years," he said, "not as the chairman. As a customer. My name is on the system as a standing member. My wife and I had dinner here 18 times before she died. The staff knew us." He paused. "I'm not telling you this because I want you to feel bad. I'm telling you because I want you to understand what it felt like to walk in on Friday and be moved to the back table without an explanation, while my original table sat empty." Sandra looked at him. She had been trying, since the call on Monday morning, to locate the exact moment where the decision had become irreversible, the moment where she could have stopped it and had not. She had found it easily. It was the moment she had looked at a man in a gray sweater and made a quiet, automatic calculation about who he was and what he was worth. "I made a judgment," she said, "about your profile. I didn't have enough information and I made a judgment anyway." "Yes," Victor said. "I'm sorry." He looked at her steadily. "I appreciate that." He asked her then about the process, not to assign blame, but to understand the mechanics. How had the flag been added without manager review? Who had access to the system? What was the escalation path when a standing member's reservation was affected by an operational adjustment? Sandra answered each question. Some of the answers were not good. By the end of the conversation, it was clear that what had happened to Victor Carter on Friday evening was not an isolated incident. It was the visible end of a system that had gradually become untransparent, where small decisions accumulated without oversight, where the definition of a priority guest had drifted from the company's own stated standards into something murkier and more instinctive. The guest who looked like money, the guest whose account had a corporate flag, the guest who would be noticed if he was unhappy. Victor stood. He thanked Sandra for her time and her candor. He did not fire her. He told her he would be in touch about the operational review, which would involve a third party and would take approximately 6 weeks and would result in a set of recommendations that he expected the management team to implement. He walked back through the main room. Table 12 was empty, as it always was at this hour. Tablecloth pressed, candle unlit, the corner window showing the canal in morning light. He stopped beside it for a moment. He did not sit down. He was not there for that. But he stood long enough to remember something. The particular way the light had come through that window the first time. The sound of his wife laughing at something he had said that he could no longer remember. The way a room can hold the shape of a night inside it without anyone knowing. Then he put on his coat and left. Dominic Harwell resigned the following week. He submitted the letter on a Tuesday, citing personal reasons, which was the phrasing people used when the specific reasons were not something they wanted in writing. Victor accepted the resignation without comment. The operational review took 7 weeks, slightly longer than projected. It produced 43 recommendations. 31 of them were implemented within 3 months. The remaining 12 were phased in over the following year, with a tracking mechanism that Sandra Forcade volunteered to oversee, and which she ran with the same efficiency she brought to everything else, which was considerable. Victor returned to Alderton House the following spring, on a Friday evening. He had table 12. He arrived at 7:14, which was 4 minutes before his booking, and he was wearing a different sweater, navy this time, also merino, also unremarkable. Audrey arrived at 7:30. She sat down across from him and looked at the room. "Good table," she said. "It's always been a good table," he said. They ordered. The food was excellent, as it had always been. The service was attentive without being intrusive. At some point during the meal, Sandra Forcade came by briefly, not to perform anything, but to check in the way a general manager checks in when she wants to know that things are as they should be. Victor thanked her. She nodded and went back to the floor. Audrey watched her go. "She seems different," she said. "She's been paying attention," Victor said. "That tends to change people." Audrey considered this. Outside the window, the canal was going dark, the last of the spring light pulling back from the water. "Do you think she knew?" Audrey asked. "On Friday, who you were?" "No," Victor said. "I don't think she did. Does that make it better or worse?" He thought about it for a moment, the real question underneath it, which was whether the offense was in the knowing or in the not knowing, whether the act of moving a man to the back of the room was worse when it was done out of calculation or out of automatic habit. "It makes it more interesting," he said finally. "The ones who know what they're doing are easier to deal with. You can address the decision. The harder thing is when no one decided anything, when it just happened." Audrey picked up her wine glass. "That's almost philosophical for a Friday night." "It's always been a philosophical table," he said. She laughed. It was her mother's laugh, which he had not expected, and it landed in the room the way certain things land, quietly, and with some weight, and without requiring anything from either of them. They finished their meal. The candle burned down. The room filled and then gradually emptied around them, the way rooms do. When they left, the table sat quiet in the corner, the window dark now, the canal gone to black in reflection. It was just a table. It had always been just a table. But some things hold what happened in them, whether or not you ask them to, whether or not you come back. Victor Carter came back. That was the whole of it, and also enough.